Now I would like to go to Dr. Nanda Kishor. We already talked about China and the US, of course, in that context, the entire geopolitics. But there are also other regions which are equally important when it comes to setting the new world order, especially Europe and Middle East. And we can see a lot of convulsion happening in the Middle East, for example, in the last 10, 20 years, where countries are trying to revisit some of their fundamentals and including relationships with other countries. A country like Saudi Arabia is even beginning to talk about reforms. And recently, you had the Prince of Saudi Arabia making some statements about an organization which became very controversial. And also, a lot of other countries like Turkey and Egypt, they're also re-looking at their priorities. There are a lot of internal stuff going on. Iran, of course, and Israel, definitely. So Middle East is one area which is reshaping in a big way. And the same with Europe also. First we had the European Union, and then we had the Brexit. In between, there is also a sort of a resurgence of a kind of nationalism in Europe, and Europe is facing its own refugee crisis, for example. So, in this context, how is India dealing with these two regions, Middle East and Europe, and the rest of the world, and how it should go about, in your point of view? What are the things that are missing?
Okay, thank you for that question. Very important to us, and we have been seeing dramatic changes because in West Asia we have most of them are Arab states, etc. We are also able to see is a renewed approach towards India. That hostility that was associated either with Palestine, the hostility that was associated with, let's say, due to Kashmir issue with Pakistan, their cordial relations with Pakistan, I think that has been put into a different perspective altogether. I think, as Ram Madhavji mentioned, the word dehyphenation is very, very important. That has come much more pragmatically since 2014 with regard to India, the way it has dealt in our country, or there's going to be a different reaction from the Arab world. All these were unfounded fears that we were having, which of the then president, who did not belong to a formally Indian National Congress or anything, but he happened to visit there. We had an external affairs minister, then Prime Minister Modi visiting. So it has changed a scenario there where things are made to look much more normal. That is one very important component. Second is also the regime changes that have come, or let's say leadership that have changes that have come in West Asia are also very, very important. On the one hand, we might have lost someone like Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, but we also have other one who still looks up to India in the same manner, because there is some amount of maturity that has come in the relationship, which there is no possibility of going backwards. But when we have people like Mohammed bin Salman, or we have the leadership in UAE, all these people are much more positive towards India. That's how India is able to manage its requirements. India is able to deal with a lot of complexities that are associated with, because when things like religion are used in international relations, it's not going to be easy. But to tread on that particular path and then yet manage all these things and tell people this is very normal, it is economic diplomacy that's going to be in the forefront, not anything else. Other things should be in periphery, is much better way of doing it. I think we are doing it in a right perspective, in a right way. I think things will get better. We have had an issue with, let's say, someone like Turkey, where Erdogan has been trying to become populist by trying to utilize certain aspects that are associated with, or any contradiction. I don't think any country in the world has been there without contradictions. I think every country has contradictions, and then they have their own ways of dealing with it, and India is no exemption in that particular scenario. Now, given that background, the way we have dealt with everybody when we had to teach or when we had to say certain things on face, we did it without any sort of fear. When Turkey tried overstepping, we put it in place and we said that this is what it is. You don't need to unnecessarily interfere in certain things that are no way related to you. So just don't do all those things. So we have moved out of that appeasement politics, which itself is perhaps for me a greater achievement, moving towards pragmatism in India's foreign policy itself, in India's worldview, or the outlook that we are trying to have towards the world order that we are facing. And then there are other complexities with the Abraham Accord coming in, where we see a number of countries coming out of the hostility. There is also, again, I said, it's the business interest, it's the economic diplomacy that's the core, where United States will continue to play the pivotal role, and it will continue to have its relations. And we have a triangular relation that has come up there. You have Saudi Arabia, you have Israel, you have UAE. These three will define all these things, and with all the three, India has very, very good relationship, and India also knows where to move in, where not to move in. When it comes to Iran and the United States, I think India backs off, and India keeps itself in a completely different manner, which is a very interesting thing to see. Europe is not that easy sort of one. Europe has multiple or let's say multi-layered contradictions when it comes to dealing with things, and they still seem to be in the 19th and the 20th century to basically try being the norm givers. They have at least understood that India has moved beyond that scenario or the situation of norm taker, and it wants to be a norm giver now. That itself is a paradigm shift that many of these powers have to understand. They still seem to be living in an utopian order where they still romanticize international relations, and they think that this is still a third world and all these people have to fall in line. There, I see bilateral relations developing much better. Things are getting much better with few countries, but there are some there here every now and then would want to put down, or they still have their colonial hangover, which will take some time, but it doesn't matter. India is focusing on business, and that business is very important. We don't need to invoke anything else. I think while shaping that, India will certainly play a different type of a role altogether, because still the financial institutions are or the leadership is in their hand. And then we still see they're trying to move on the words of secularism, democracy, to a lot of other things. I think India is much more confident these days when it talks about and whatever that it deals with. It has come up with new narrative, which I call as polemic. It has come up with that narrative, which it can very clearly put across and say, this is what I mean, and I don't need to mince words. I don't need to appease you. Neither you need to do that. But I think we are trying to draw lines, and I think we are pushing towards a rule-based world order. We are trying to tell them that don't unnecessarily hop around or move around certain things that are very, very subjective, but let's talk business. Let's keep the lines clear. Let's talk about a rule-based world order. You follow the same, I will also follow the same. I think with both of these, we are trying to do this one. I think the Prime Minister is very clear in terms of the way, if we have to ask me a comparison between European Union and West Asia, I think we are much better with West Asia than European Union. European Union still tries to push across certain things, and it would talk big things, but in delivery, I think we're still lacking behind, and they don't really do things to what they promise. So I still feel, I think with West Asia, our movement is much positive, and I think we have made inroads. We have dehyphenated. We have learned the game of politics. I still remember a scholar who said India during the Cold War did not learn the grammar of international politics. I think now we have learned grammar, and we have gone little beyond grammar itself in international politics. I'll probably stop with that. Thank you.